It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning. Young OR, as it was called back in my day, was actually the place where I gave my first ever professional talk. So this conference has always been special to me, and so I'm delighted to have the opportunity to come back, even if it does mean that I'm coming back in the bracket of officially old OR. Not quite sure how that happened, but I can live with that. I can live with that. In the 20 years since I last spoke here, I've seen business transform beyond recognition. I know it will seem very strange to all of you to hear this, but when I first started work, the internet was only just being born, and it was only just starting to get established. Google was born in the final few months of my last year at university, and in all honesty, I didn't know whether to cry or scream with delight the first time that I used it, because I knew there and then that the degree that I would have done had I been starting then would have been totally different to the degree that I had just completed. But I think even at that stage, I don't think we ever could have predicted where we are now with technology. The first 10 years of my career, I definitely saw change. Technology started to mature. We got things like web conferencing software, so WebEx and things like that was born for the first time. We got bulk mailers, we got chat forums, we finally got Ajax, which allowed us to make dynamic web pages, so we could finally make bits of web pages scroll up and down. That was revolutionary at that time. And it sort of hinted and started to let us see where the web might go and the potential that might be there. And I know that seems ridiculous, but those things truly were step changing for us at that point in business. At that stage in business, your ability to be able to transform your business or your ideas that you wanted to implement were constrained by technology. If you asked if something could be done at that stage, you heard no as often as you heard yes. We had the starting of technology, but it just wasn't quite there yet. It was good, but not great. In the last 5 years of my career, I have seen change at a rate that just makes my head spin and my heart jump with delight. It's all the technologies that we saw 20 years ago have finally matured. They've got stable, they've got reliable, and businesses are no longer constrained by technology. These days, if you ask, can it do this? You'll hear yes. And then you'll hear, and this, and this, and this, and this. The challenge today is actually learning to say no to some of this shiny new technology, which for a tech and a geek addict like myself, that is absolutely impossible. So I like all the new kind of shiny things. And I don't see this pace of change plateauing anytime soon. If anything, I think it's actually going to accelerate. I think in this new world that we're living in, that the only constant in business is going to be change, and it's going to be exponential change. You're the only audience where I could ever use that phrase because nobody else knows what an exponential distribution is. Every business is undergoing a digital transformation, and every single business principle is being ripped up and reimagined for this new digital era. I'm really lucky in my job. I get to go across the world and attend lots of conferences, both on this side of the world and particularly in the US. And when I go around travelling, I'm getting the opportunity to interact with a lot of business leaders across the globe, and all of them say the same thing, that the key challenge that they're wrestling with as an organisation is digital transformation. It's such a big thing that the IDC actually estimate that 40% of all technology spending in 2019 will be on digital transformation. That's $2 trillion. It's a lot of cash. So it's hardly surprising that also then when I'm travelling around the world, the thing that I hear most from people leading OR teams is that that's the biggest challenge that they have been asked to support the organisation with as well as digital transformation. So although I will admit that's probably mostly in the US. In the UK, I think mostly what I hear from people is that we're all wrestling with Brexit and what's going to come, what's not going to come. So yeah, hopefully some of you are helping government figure that out for us. And in the US in particular, they are shifting the entire makeup of their OR teams to actually support this digital transformation. I'm part of an industry steering group in the US for Informs, which is the US equivalent of the OR Society. And so it's made up of all the heads of various different OR and analytics teams across the US. So you've got the head of Google Analytics, you've got your Fords, you've got your GMs, you've got your Boeing. So it's a really good group of people. And they're all leading really large OR teams. How many of those people in those teams do you think are software engineers? 10%? Higher? 25%? Higher? Typically, a lot of those OR groups have 75% of their team as software engineers. Yeah. There's a reason for that. Now, the first reason is that OR in the US is more what you would call sort of hard OR. I don't mean like tough OR, I mean like technical. So they focus a lot more on sort of optimization and kind of linear programming and all the sort of the more sort of computational kind of side of OR. But the other part of it is that they also are doing digital transformation. And they're changing the makeup of the solutions that they're being asked to produce. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. It's digital transformation. And what I want to do is take you through a lightningly fast road trip of some of the current technologies that are out there that are driving some of this change. Lightningly fast because there is just so much happening in this space that it is actually impossible to tell you about all of it. So what I'm going to try and do is focus on the ones that I actually think will impact on OR the most. And then what I want to do after taking you through that road trip is challenge us all to think, and what does that mean for OR? How does that mean that we need to change as a profession? Because the only thing that I know for certain is that everything else in the world is changing. So I don't think we can arrogantly sit and just assume that we don't get to change. In my experience, if you don't change, you get left behind. And the only constant, like I said, in this new kind of digital era is change. So I do think we have to change. So before I kind of go into kind of technology, let me just take a step back and just kind of clarify exactly what I mean by digital transformation. Digital transformation, unfortunately, is a bit of an overused term. As a lot of terms tend to end up being, and it's been used by an awful lot of organisations just to kind of explain anything that they're doing that's related to digital. It also gets used by vendors, such as myself, kind of trying to jump on the latest kind of bandwagon. And it also gets used a lot by business leaders describing what is really in honesty digital modernisation. So taking your organisation from using Excel on your desktop and starting to use Google Sheets in the cloud, that's not digital transformation. Neither is taking all your files and storing them on a desktop and moving them to the cloud. That's digital modernisation. That's not digital transformation. Digital transformation is when the whole organisation's processes and business model are being transformed by data and technology to deliver better customer experience and value. Now, the key words in that are business model, so how you make your cash effectively, the data and the technology part, obviously, because they're the drivers, and then the customer experience and the value. So the experience that the customer has when they kind of interact with you as an organisation, and then also the value that you impart to those customers. Those are the key elements. So I think it's actually kind of more effectively drawn as a Venn diagram to show all of these kind of interacting parts. But you'll notice that in my definition, I said that customer experience was an output. But when I've drawn it here, I've also drawn it as an input. Because I think one of the most exciting things about this digital era has been the opportunity to change the customer experience for consumers ourselves. And I think as that's happened, we have then set further expectations. So we're no longer happy with a sort of a kind of shaky kind of website, something like that. We're demanding a good customer experience as well. So as much as we're the receivers of the output of that change, we're also drivers of the inputs that are causing that change. So let me put this into context and give you a kind of couple examples of what I think is digital transformation. Let's take my morning coffee. right? I don't know about all of you, but I really, really need my morning coffee, right? Especially because I've got 2 young children who still like jumping in between different beds in the middle of the night. So I really, really, really need my morning coffee. And so and go back in time and what I would have to do if my coffee ran out. So first of all, I'd let out a great big scream. Then I would run upstairs, brush my teeth, try and put together some kind of semi-respectable outfit that didn't quite look like I was still in my pyjamas. Run down the stairs, get the kids together, do the same for them, just get them in the car, drive to the shop, take them round the shop, explain to them that no, you're not getting sweeties at 9 o'clock in the morning, kind of harass them, get to the kind of the checkout, buy my coffee, get them all back into the car, drive back home, park the car, get back out of the car, get everybody in, and then finally I get my glorious cup of coffee. These days, what do? So now when I'm taking out the last spoonful of my coffee out of the jar, what I do is I turn round and I shout, Alexa, order me a new jar of coffee. The very next day, my coffee arrives, delivered to me, linked up from my Prime account. That's not even digital transformation, that is complete digital disruption. Let me also give me another example that reflects more of the sort of the business side of digital transformation. So, and I'll take one from Simulate Corporation. So we're about to launch Simulate Online. Don't tell the Martin team that I told you that. But so we're going to take our desktop product and we're going to put it online. This is a complete first for our industry. Nobody's done this before. And we're going to be the first fully fledged web-based simulation tool. So we've taken every feature of the desktop tool and we've put it into our online version. Why did we do that? Where did that come from? It came from asking ourselves the question, if we were a startup today, what would Simulate Corporation look like? If we were building software for the first time today, what would we have built that software to look like? And like any other startup that would have been starting today, we would have built it as an online tool. So that's a big part of digital transformation for organisations like mine that have been established, is that we're competing with all of the new startups that are coming out. They are born and bred digital, so they just need to leverage digital. We need to transform. The other side of us putting our software online is the ability to change our business model and do business more effectively. So from now on, the customer experience will improve as well. You can go to the website, you can sign up for a trial, and then go straight away, start it, no downloading software, trying to get IT's kind of permission to get it installed, all that stuff. And then once you're using the trial version, we can detect from all the data that we're collecting the things that people most often find difficult, where they get stuck. We can detect when you are getting stuck and use automation in the background to send you some appropriate emails that are going to help you get started. We can use some AI technology to figure out the right type of prompts and things like that to put in the software. So it gives us a completely new platform and a new, more effective and efficient way of doing business. It also allows us to explore new business models, because then we can add a share button into our software. And so the same way as you can do with Office 365 and send your Word document onto somebody else to comment, you can do that with your simulations. And that allows us as a business to explore land and expand strategies, which is a whole new way of doing business for us. And that's the type of thing that all of these organisations are going through. So they're trying to find new ways with digital transformation to do things more effectively and more efficiently, but also to deliver a better customer experience and untap new sources of revenue for themselves. So hopefully these examples give you a bit of a better picture of what I mean by digital transformation. And now what I want to do is go on and talk about some of the trends that are helping that and enabling that to happen. Now, I know I said this was digital transformation. The reality is it looks a bit more like this. And the reason for that is that tech, data, customer experience, all these different things, they've become so intertwined that it's actually really hard to separate any one thing off into one box and call it data or call it tech. But bear with me, because for the next section, that's what I'm going to try and do. So I'm going to try and put things into the boxes just to bring some sort of sense of order to all of these kind of terms. And I'm also going to go really fast, and I'm going to talk about some dev-related things, which at times you're going to think, why is she talking about that? But it'll all kind of come together at the end. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is talk about data. I think data has been the most transformative thing to happen to business over the last 10 years. And I think it's certainly the trend that has the most potential to impact on OR. For the first ever simulation that I built, I literally had to go down to the maternity ward and I sat with a stopwatch and I had to count the patients going in and out of the various different stages of the clinic. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that was the only way that you had to get that type of data at that point. When I built simulation models, I generally built them with expert opinion rather than data because the data just wasn't there. These days, it is totally different. If we want to get that same data that I got from the maternity hospital, we just go and we send in a request and we get all the information back from electronic health records. So we have an abundance of new data. And data is often described as the new oil of industry. Well, I think it's actually way, way better than that. Data is the new sun of business because it's a resource that just keeps on going and going and going and it never runs out and we can reuse it and get new insights again and again and again. And the best thing is that we haven't even got to all of the potential of all the data there. There's so many new sources of data that we can start to tap into. So that's the first one I want to talk to you about is more data and some of it dark. And I didn't make up dark. Dark data is actually a real thing and it's not related to the sinister side of the web in any way at all. What dark data is it's basically that organisations have been collecting loads of data, either for conformance or just because they thought, well, do you know what, data storage is dead cheap, so I may as well collect it just in case. So there's an amazing amount of source of data there. They actually estimate that 90% of the big data in the world is actually dark data. So that means that 90% of the data that is out there, we have yet to be able to explore and unpack and see the kind of the potential in. And that's where the new advances in technologies are going to help us. So there's new technology so for image processing and natural language processing that means that we're starting to finally be able to open up those parts of the data. I mean, image processing is just phenomenal. We can now actually scan cancer scans for patients and actually diagnose cancer more accurately than a doctor can. That's absolutely staggering that we can now have got technology to that stage. And we're even in text emails and things like that, being able to start to pick up sentiment and the context of what the text means rather than just the literal meanings. So secondly, because dark data is unstructured data, which is sort of like messy data, so data that isn't a 1 or a 0 or true or kind of a false. An awful lot of the dark data is unstructured data. It's these new technologies that are starting to open up that data to allow us to explore it. Now, from an OR perspective, what I think is most exciting about the fact that we're going to open up this dark data is that I'm convinced that that dark data is the connections. It's the dots. It's the whys behind what we've seen in data for so long. And what will allow us to do is to unlock a new level of digital transformation. Just think what you could predict and what you could inform business about if you can process every single transaction that happens inside of an organisation. That brings me on to the next trend, which is prescriptive and cognitive analytics. Now, you can't talk about tech trends and not talk about AI and machine learning, but I know you all know what that is, so I'm not going to go into lots of detail today on that. But what I would say is that it's part of a branch of analytics which has been called prescriptive and cognitive analytics. And basically what this whole trend is about is acknowledging the leap that we've now made, where we're no longer using data to look at historic and we're no longer just using it to predict the future. We're actually using it to make decisions for us. I mean, we've all heard the horror stories about how AI will take away jobs. And it will do that. And I think we're used to hearing about the jobs that it'll take away in factories and other kind of places. The interesting thing is that they also think it'll take away data jobs because they actually think that a lot of this AI and technologies will be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting of some of the initial kind of data analysis, leaving us all kind of free to look at the kind of the top end of the spectrum of data analysis, so the prescriptive and cognitive analytics. And I think we can't lose sight, because I think a lot of people get scared when we talk about AI, and I just think we cannot lose sight of the immense opportunities that it presents for us to change decision making. So A good example of a prescriptive and analytics tool is something that we've seen some of our customers do with simulation, which is to take a decision that is typically made by somebody with 20 years of experience who can juggle all the different kind of parts of their information and sort of create magic. If any of you've worked on the shop floor or worked with manufacturing, you see this. This is the guy that runs the plant. He just has this magic touch of just knowing exactly what parts of the process to kind of to pull to keep it all going and just quite how to make that schedule. You also see it in hospitals with bed managers, because bed management is an incredibly difficult job to do. One, because it's a constrained resource, so there just aren't enough beds. But two, that actually figuring out where your patient should go for today has a big impact on where the next patient goes and where the next patient goes and where the next patient goes. And there's a whole blend of complex decisions that you have to put together to do that. So there are various different rules. There are rules about not mixing genders on the same ward. There's rules about the fact that if you're an ortho patient, you have to go into a side room and it's got to have been sterilised for a certain kind of time period. You also have to blend the fact of what's the elective surgeries, so the planned surgeries that are going to come in for the day. And then you have to balance that with the emergency arrivals. And you have to balance that with the makeup of each of those people and individuals inside of that emergency arrival. So bed managers do an amazing job of figuring out where to place patients. But using prescriptive technology, we can actually give them tools that allows them to run forward and to see all of the patients that are going to come in for the rest of the day through emergency and through planned arrivals, so that they can make the right decision when where to place a patient, not just for this patient, but for the whole day of the hospital. And that's absolutely critical, because a lot of these decisions that are so important in organisations have such big impacts. A bed in a hospital costs £300 a night. It's just for a basic bed. If you're in intensive care, it's £1,000 plus a night. So it's an expensive problem, but even more so than that, if you come in as a patient and you're an outlier, so you're coming in as a cardio patient and you're not being able to go to the cardio ward, you've gone to another ward, your personal outcomes will decline. So you are more likely, and I don't want to say the horrible scary D word, but your own personal outcomes are a lot worse if you're not on the bed of your specialty that you're supposed to be on. So it's a really important problem, and it's a really great example of how AI technology and these prescriptive and analytic tools can take something as a decision that has to be made on a routine basis and make it better and make it more effectively and support the people in making those decisions. That brings us to our last trend, data ops. Has anyone heard of DevOps? Cool, good. That's a few more names hands than I expected. So has anyone heard of, well, essentially data ops is DevOps, but for data. Has anyone heard of data SecOps or DevSecOps? Okay, good. Two names, two hands, that's good. So now, for most of you, so I think we had about 3 or 4 hands up there, so for most of you, hearing that doesn't really kind of help you at all, but what DevOps was the recognition that where software was often getting stuck in an organisation, so not software kind of like mine, but the software tools that organisations are making was getting stuck was when development was throwing it over to operations. Things were getting blocked because with the best world in the world, software developers try and think of everything they possibly can, but the only certainty in software is that there will be bugs. So they would throw it over and it would get stuck, and that's largely because as you throw the software over into operations, you're working across a myriad of different kind of servers, you've got firewalls, you've got the different combinations of bits of software that are on an end user's machine. So there's a lot of complexity to it, and IT and dev probably get quite a hard rap in terms of kind of rolling out these types of systems. It is actually really tough. And then web software came along, and so the advent of web software meant that organisations were no longer just building software and building installers either. Now they were actually having to manage these services. So now they actually had servers that they had to maintain themselves, and so if they wanted to push out a new bit of software, they had to manage taking all the current users from one server, putting them onto another server. They had to have rollback kind of features, policies and rollback kind of features, all sorts of kind of complications. And so companies like SD and Evernote created DevOps as a way to handle this. And what that did was to integrate dev and operations more closely together, so that they were actually thinking about the deployment of the software from the start. And then add into that SEC, which is cyber. And now that is one of the other biggest challenges for any organisation, is cyber. And so cyber is integrating that also into the development, operations in cyber. So getting everybody to work together right from the start when we're building the code. So, and data SecOps is just the equivalent of that. Now, why as OR people should you care about data SecOps and DevOps? Because I think if we take it back to the previous point, that there's more and more of these prescriptive tools being created, and I think it's going to be us that organisations are going to look towards, or should be looking towards, to create those prescriptive and cognitive tools. And then once those cognitive tools are established, then business is now relying on those. They're now tools that they're going to use every single day. So I think one of the challenges is going to be that we'll then have to be creating tools that will have to be put into production in the exact same way as development and other teams now have to think about putting things into production. So we'll have to understand how to maintain those. We'll have to have version control of our algorithms. We'll need to have automated testing environments, test scripts of the latest code, rollback features, all of the same things that a lot of development teams are having to wrestle with. I think we will as well. Okay, so that's all of the data trends, and now I'm going to move on to the tech trends, and there is an awful lot of overlap between these things, so some of these things you could argue are kind of data trends as well. Has anybody heard of blockchain? Funnily enough, it's the same hands that have gone up on each of those things. I'm getting a sense of where you guys are kind of based. Okay, so has anybody heard of Bitcoin? Right, okay, a lot more hands going up. So basically, blockchain is what is behind Bitcoin, right? So officially, that is called distributed ledger tech. That cleared everything right up, didn't it? You know exactly what that is now, okay? So blockchain is it's difficult. It's difficult technology to work with, and it's fair to say that actually the majority of the world is actually still trying to get their heads around blockchain and what it can do for them. And actually, because of that, some people are even starting to say that it's not useful. I think that's because they take a purist view of it. What blockchain is that it's the ability to take all of your data and have them linked but isolated. So what that means is if one link in the chain gets attacked, it doesn't make all of the other parts of the data vulnerable. So it just takes out one kind of block, not everything. Now, the best kind of, in the purest kind of sense of it, where it's supposed to be used is in cross organisations. So in simulate corporations sharing data with the OR Society, for example. And I think that's why when people talk about it in a purist sense, they start to say that maybe it's not that useful, because how many cases are there when you want to share data kind of across organisations? I think government is a good use case of it. We have data across various different government organisations, so in a purest sense, that's a very good use case for it. But I still think it's worth watching, because I think it does have the ability to get over a lot of the challenges that organisations have in terms of adopting a lot of digital transformation. And lots of organisations are starting to use it for their own internal data, so not taking a purist view of it. So I think what blockchain has the power to do is to remove a lot of the barriers for digital transformation. Now, one perfect use case of blockchain is for this, having all of these safely kind of sharing data between all of these new smart devices that we've got, which takes us to the Internet of Everything. We have whole new sets of sort of user interfaces, if you want to call it a different word, that we didn't have access to sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and some of them even now still seem a bit like science fiction. I mean, we've got watches tracking our vitals all the time, so we're quite comfortable with that. We've got automatic diabetic pumps that are monitoring and managing our insulin for us, so that we don't have to be kind of testing ourselves all the time. The one that I like the most, though, is that we now have gut belts, which are being used in certain scenarios, because your gut is actually the first predictor of your emotional state, bizarrely. So it knows earlier than any other kind of part of your body or any other part of your technology about your emotions. And then we've got the things like Alexa that we talked about earlier, which is just, Alexa, what's the time? And so what I mean by user interfaces is these are all new user interfaces. We were used to having keyboards and mice. Keyboards and mice are now disappearing. Our integration with digital technology is becoming seamless, and it's getting in our way a lot less. And all of that new smart data, smart devices are obviously providing us with new sources of data. And the same's happening in manufacturing. So IoT, Industry 4.0, all the Internet of Things, all of these things, they basically mean the exact same thing. And it's about the manufacturing equipment that now has sensors on it, and also in hospitals and various different other places. So equipment that's sensing its own kind of performance, that's also collecting data, so process level data, and sending that kind of back for us to use. A good example of this in practice is oil production. So for oil production, one of the key challenges is once you sort of untap that oil reservoir and the oil kind of comes gushing out, the only thing you can't do is turn that back off again. So they spend an incredible amount of time and they use techniques like simulation to work out the exact configuration of all of that equipment. And the reliability of the equipment is such that what they will do is try and figure out how many bits of additional kit they need so that the production line never has to be choked back, essentially. So they'll work out exactly how many spares that they need, which doesn't sound like a big kind of challenge, but some of those machines or pieces of equipment, it can be at least $100,000, some of them even more than that. They can go into the millions. So whether you have one or you have two of them is a big deal. Now, even after they've planned this all out and they've got all of the equipment working, they've still got planned maintenance schedules to put on top of that to keep the equipment up to scratch, because it might have to last kind of 20 odd years. And then they'll still be doing lots of kind of manual inspections to kind of keep all of that kind of equipment up to date. So then they'll still get failures. It's just inevitable. There will be kind of failures, and at those kind of points, the oil then gets choked back, and it literally costs millions of barrels. It's measured in millions of barrels in seconds, so it's actually quite frightening the amount of cash there is there. What these sensors do is the ability to transform all of that. So yes, we will still have to have spares and do all that reliability kind of modelling. But what it does is allow us to reduce the amount of manual inspection that needed done, because the equipment itself can actually sense when it's starting to degrade and what parts of it are starting to degrade, so that we can request the engineers to come in before the failure happens. That has the impact to dramatically reduce costs. We've done some IoT modelling for some of the vendors and in terms of simulation, and it's actually staggering the savings that they can bring to the businesses and the more efficiency. Now, the most exciting part about this IoT for us as OR professionals is that it gives us access to a new source of data, a new source of information, but it's also that it's process data. And it's data that's happening in real time as well. And this gives us the opportunity to take everything that we've been doing manually for years and automate the process improvement. So it's a staggering opportunity. That brings me to the next trend, which is digital twins. Now, as somebody that's specialised in simulation for 20 years, this, I have to confess, is my absolute favourite trend of all. And what Gartner's predicting that every organisation needs to have is a digital twin. Essentially, a digital twin is a simulation, so a process simulation, very similar to what you'd build with Simulate, but it's hooked up to your real-time data feeds and the real process. So that basically means that the simulation is being kept continuously in sync. And it's not just about feeding it with the data about the current stock levels or anything like that. It's also about sensing and changing and responding to changes in the process. So it's about taking something that is then adaptive rather than a static piece of analysis. That is just staggering. And it's amazing. And what that means is that it can take techniques like simulation, and we can actually have them be a player in the operational management of these organisations. And this is not even fanciful. Some people are actually starting to build these digital twins. I'd recommend you check out Ocado if you can. They've got some amazing work on digital twins, and it's been used to drive their entire organisation and their processes. And the power of it is that you can be running these digital twins forward. So it's not just that they're kept in sync, it's the ability for them to run forward and is to alert us to problems before they actually happen. So not problems in terms of the machinery or the failures like we talked about with Internet of Things, but to see that the makeup of our arrivals of our patients has changed. Or that what's in the production has changed more than we expected, and actually 2 days from now or 3 days from now we're going to have a problem, so that actually we can start getting the staff in place to maybe come and alleviate that problem or start changing some of our production schedules. So it's another example of how operational research or how data and technology is driving us towards creating systems and not just doing one-off pieces of analysis. And I think that's going to be an ongoing trend that you're going to keep hearing from me, is that we're being asked to build tools because business now wants to rely on these technologies for us. That takes me to the last trend in tech, which is edge computing, which I'm not going to talk a lot about because it's actually not the most interesting trend in the world. Essentially, all it means is that it's about organisations having a backup generator for the cloud. Right. So government and various different industries are coming together to actually create whole new networks designed specifically to support IoT devices and other kinds of similar technology. And it's a recognition of how much business is planning to rely on these various technologies, so much so that they can't see or don't want to be at the risk of those even being down for a few seconds. And they also don't want to take the latency, so the speed of the connection with the cloud. So they're building their own networks, just the same as you used to have backup generators. So I think this trend is important because I think it's evidence of how committed business is to all of these data and technology trends. Okay. So lastly, I want to talk to you about customer experience. Now, I know it does seem a bit of an odd thing to kind of pull out when you're talking about tech and trend, but I think it's a big part, like I said at the start, of why organisations do digital transformation. I mean, they do digital transformation to improve their efficiency, reduce costs and find new business models, but it's also to deliver a better value to our customers. And that's what all customer experience is about. And I think as consumers, we've seen our lives transformed through digital. It started with smartphones, where we had kind of apps, and all of these kind of changes have shifted what we expect from technology forever. You know, we have really high standards on what we want from technology and really high standards on what we expect from customer experience. At the same time, the web has overtaken, and we've all become very, very comfortable with shopping on the web and doing all these things. So marketing now has a whole new wealth of data that it can use. So marketing has become completely digital. Marketing is digital now. That's the biggest thing that they do. It's less about the sort of the PR campaigns and everything else. It's about the digital marketing. It's cost effective and it gets the consumers right in the place where they need to be. It started with a whole load of companies like HubSpot and Marketos and many other ones who basically developed marketing automation technology. So when you feel like you're getting this very unique, personalised, contextual customer experience that you've come to know and understand, and you feel like they know you, that's because they do, and because they're tracking all of your data. You're generating 2.5 quintillion bytes of data on the internet per day. I didn't know what a quintillion was, so I had to look it up. Generating more data, of course, and has 18 zeros. So it's 18 zeros, that's how much data we make as consumers. And so they take this data and all these wonderful insights and they put it together with this new marketing automation technology, which basically can send you emails that say, "Hi John," and they pull out various different fields from the database, these making it feel very kind of personalised to you. They can track you across various different devices. They can tell what you've searched on and use that to kind of inform you other kind of parts that they do. So marketing has now been transformed from an art into a science. And the most exciting kind of part of all of that is that what it's allowing businesses to do finally is to monetize their data. And for a lot of digital transformation, that is what you probably describe as the holy grail. So it's the combination of bringing together all of this kind of data and tech and creating this unique personal experience to get to you right at the point where you are most susceptible So whether that's because you've come to a critical point in your buying cycle, or whether it's about getting to you before we think you're going to start to churn because we can start to see evidence of you using the application less, so we're trying to pull you back in again. All of that's about what organisations do in terms of monetising data. It's about leveraging that data and leveraging the customers or exploiting them, depending on your viewpoint. And I think that what's also good to say is that this is creating a new wave of businesses as well, so that actually I think what's most exciting, what I think sums up the entire digital revolution that we're living in, is that we now have businesses that are just starting up, that are built on data and using data to do things that we never could have imagined 5 years ago. Malsey, who's a startup in Scotland, which I don't know if any of you have heard of, is a perfect example of this. It's basically Tinder for clothes. I'd say I'd recommend checking it out, but I probably wouldn't because it's very, very clever and it gets to know your weak spots quite quickly. I have far too many shoes and bags I have bought as part of kind of Malsey. But it's not about that. It's not about the AI that they do. You'd think they make most of their money from selling clothes. They don't. They make most of their money from selling your data about what you like and what you dislike back to the retailers. And then they use that to test out new campaigns before they take them live. And I think that's a perfect example of just how different the world is now and how different businesses are. And it's also an example of a startup. And it's also a big driver in why organisations across the globe are having to transform, because we have to keep pace with these startups or we're going to be left behind. So that's all the technologies that are driving digital transformation. To be honest, I've only just scraped the surface, and there's just so much exciting stuff happening in this area. But I think it gives you a sense of how much is happening and why it's going to become the mainstay of business. So how does this impact OR? How do we as a profession need to change so that we can help our organisations or other organisations through this digital transformation? So I've got this other Venn diagram here. As you can see, I like a Venn diagram. Tech, data, CX, that's all the things that we've talked about. But the reality is digital transformation doesn't happen in an organisation unless you get the people, the processes and the technology working well. You can do it, but it will fail massively. So organisations that don't get the people part of it right, so taking your people with you on that journey, and the processes part right, so in rolling out that new technology, embedding it and finding out how to make their organisations stick with it. If you don't get that right, you'll fail catastrophically. It's estimated that $900 billion was wasted on digital transformation last year. So when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong, and it's an expensive thing to get wrong. Now, I think OR will be absolutely critical in helping organisations through this digital transformation. Change management through all of this is fundamental, and I think that's what we know. We do so well in OR. We can help people even before they start it. So all of the problem formulation, the scenario selection, analytics like simulation to figure out if they're going to do the right thing and the wrong thing. So I think our role as a change agent in this digital transformation is an absolute given. And that's what we do and what we do really well. And it's all of the soft OR techniques and some of the analytical techniques that we do today. However, if we roll forward and we say, okay, we're looking towards this new era where we've got AI and we've got all these prescriptive techniques and we've got data advancements, then I think that's when I think we need to start evolving and when we need to start changing. Now, I know that we've been through revolutions before. So we've been through the Industrial Revolution and everybody said, steam, we've got to do steam. And then steam kind of came and went. I think the digital revolution is totally different. And I think this is going to stay for good. And that's why it's so important that we change. In the Industrial Revolution, when steam changed, one part of business changed, production. In the digital revolution, every single part of the business is changed. Every single part, from HR, how it's managed, the processes that it's using, every single kind of part. So there's not a part of the business that isn't left unchanged. So I do think we'll have to change too. And I actually think we're starting to see that some of that evolution take place. I haven't been to the Young OR conference in a long time. Sorry, new to OR. I'm not allowed to call it Young OR conference in a long time, and because I'm not allowed to, not because I don't want to, because I'm not allowed to. And it's been really interesting to see the contrast between old OR and the new OR conference. And there's so many more data scientists here. And I've heard much more talk about AI and data science than I do at the older kind of OR conference. So, and I think that's really exciting because I think it starts to show that there is a new wave of change coming through. And I think we need to do more of this. Partially because, like I said at the start, with AI technology and organisations are also taking initiatives like creating data citizens, we're trying to empower everybody throughout our organisation with data and how to leverage it. So I think some of the problems that have been our domain space before will start to get tackled by sort of normal kind of people. So, and I think what we will be asked to do is to help with the problems right up at this end, the really kind of tough AI, prescriptive and cognitive analytics problems. And for that, I think we will need some extra skills. My biggest worry or fear is that I think this is what the landscape looks like right now. So I think we've got some overlap with OR and data science, and then software engineering and DevOps and things like that are kind of way over at the other side. And I think that as more and more organisations get used to coming to the data scientists for the prescriptive and the AI solutions, there's a real risk that they won't know what we do and that we get left behind. So what I think we need to get to is something much more like this, where I think it's about collaboration and it's about sort of integrated, kind of blended kind of teams. And again, I think we are starting to see some of that. I think in many organisations, there's a lady I was talking to last night, and that's definitely how their organisation works. But interestingly, because of the company where she comes from and because it's a new company, it's a technology first company. So in technology companies, we're very used to working in blended, cross-functional, multidisciplined, autonomous teams. And I think we need to do more and more of that in even the established kind of organisations and blend ourselves with these other disciplines. So how do we do that? So I think we need to evolve and change in a few different ways. So first of all, we need to learn to code. And I'm not trying to offend anybody in here because I know many of you do actually know how to code, but many of us don't. And that surprises me. I was talking to Emma, who is one of my interns that is working for me right now, and she's studying management science at university. And it absolutely floored me that in 4 years of her undergraduate degree, she has been given zero exposure to coding. That just baffles me. I just don't understand it because I think coding is becoming like reading and writing. It's a new digital skill. It's a new skill just like that. And I think as the processes become more and more digital and they become more black box, how we walk the process, it won't be like how I did it and walked down and had a stopwatch and I talked to kind of experts of the process. The process is going to be hidden in this box in the back end. We're going to need to interrogate it through the code, or at least know how to get others to interrogate it for us through code. And then that brings me to the next part. I think, like I've said quite a few times, I think we're going to be asked to build systems. And I think that's really exciting because it's about the technology and what we do being so recognised that people want to embed that in their organisations. So I think we need to learn to build applications. So there's coding and there's scripting, and then there's building applications, and they're different things. So coding and scripting is about maybe getting a bit of Python to do what you need it to do, generate kind of your algorithm. Building applications is what engineers do, and it's tough. It means thinking about how you architect it, thinking about how it solves problems for today and tomorrow, making sure that it's coded for 1 to n. It's also about making sure that it's efficient and robust so that you've optimised every single line of code so that it's going to do it in seconds rather than kind of taking days. It's a very different way of thinking. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to become software engineers, but in my experience, to work with software engineers, you have to understand a bit of what they're doing. If we want to make sure that our algorithms are deployed properly and meet the user requirements, then I think we're going to need to learn to architect tools. And then, like I said, I think we need to work in blended teams much more. So getting used to just being part of a team where we're working with all these different people and we all bring different things to the table. And then lastly, I think we need design thinking and product management. Again, we're going to be building tools, and so figuring out what the users need and what they want, trust me, from years of working in software, that is very, very tough. And there's a lot of having to say no more than you say yes. And I think there's the principles of design thinking, which are all about understanding, are we delivering something of value? Are we getting something that our end users absolutely need? And I think we have all the foundations of those there in the OR skill set. I think that's what we've done really well today, and I think we can do much more of that, and I think that's a big part of what we can bring to the development of these tools in the future, is understanding, are these going to have an impact on the organisation, and is it going to be the right impact? So I think we need to be blended. We need our OR skills, our maths, our problem structure and our formulation, and we bring it together with our new set of kind of core skills and ability to execute OR to a whole new level in this new digital world. That's me done. But what I want to do is leave you with just a couple last thoughts. I hope if you're taking away anything from this talk, it's understanding that this is one of the most exciting revolutions of business. And that this digital space is complicated, but it's also exciting, and there is so much potential there. And that the only constant in this world is going to be change, and it's going to get faster and faster and faster for a long time before it plateaus. And in this new world, everything meshes together. There's no separate things, everything is just meshed together. But most importantly, what I want you to think about is that you are the next generation of OR professionals. You have been born and bred in this digital era. So you've heard some of my ideas today, and some you'll agree with and some you'll disagree with. And I don't have all of the answers at all, but I think you all do. And what I'd implore you to do is to challenge yourselves, challenge your peers, and most importantly, challenge the old OR timers like me to change and to guide us in what that change should look like. Thank you. That's it.